Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to some of you and peace to the rest of you. Black Heart, signing black in again. Check this out. If you like it, then hit the like button. Subscribe only if you were inclined to do so anyway. What's more important is that you take this message and you spread it. That's what's important to me. If you don't send the link to someone, at least take the content of what I'm saying and share it with others so that they can benefit from this. Because the message is more important than the messenger. Keep that in mind. Understand this. I'm going to make this about two things in one. The first thing I want to point out is that BGS IBMOR did a video 2 years ago in which he asked, do black nerds and educated lames have to leave the community? And the answer is yes. Now, it's sad to say, but yes, black nerds and educated lames need to leave the community, and here's why. It's the same reason for the second thing I'm going to talk about. They're tied in together in this case. This is a combination. And that reason is simple. African American women, the community as a whole, but specifically African American women, are driving out not only the nerds and the lames, but they are driving out normal men because they are categorizing them with actual nerds and actual lames. Men that are somehow disabled emotionally or intellectually. Men who are somehow lacking in manhood. These kinds of things. Women are African American women specifically are driving these men out. If you're a normal black man and you're just not an idness, genetically speaking, they're driving you out. They're telling you to stay, but how are they driving you out? They're offering you a deal that you can't afford to take and limiting you to the deal that you can't afford to take. Look here, Mr. Lame, and you a normal dude. You ain't even got to be a lame. Lames are rare. Nerds are rare. But you a normal dude, and what they're saying to you is, look here, Mr. Lame. You need to take me as I am. And right now, I can't mess with you because you lame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to fuck this idness nigga. And after he and I have our kids, because his genes are okay, if he don't work out, he don't stick around because he already got these other baby mamas he ain't doing nothing for, then I'll come around to you and you can take care of the baby. And if I feel like it, or I'm just feeling extra generous, I might give you some pussy. And yes, to the audience, I'm making this about the pussy. Because I'm an old man, it don't matter to me no more. So what this means is I can speak without bias. But I'm still biased on behalf of the young, the men and the women. But the thing is, it ain't young men pushing away the women. That's not what's going on. If young men aren't actually pushing away the women and saying you need to take an inferior deal, what young men might do is simply say, okay, you're not my type, I'm not dating you. I'm not disrespecting you, but I'm not dating you. Generally speaking, that's usually what's going on. Although high school could be a different story. Anybody's likely to say anything. At the end of the day, no. Young men, especially after high school, young men ain't pushing the women away en masse. All they're simply saying, okay, I'll date her or I won't date her. But you got sisters pushing young dudes away and making these deals. Offering them only these bad deals. And it's only because they're normal, not because they're actually wimps or cowards or nerds or lames. Normal guys are being miscategorized as such and being driven and pushed out. So yes, the answer is they have to leave because even normal guys have to. Some say, well, why does it have to be about the sex? Well, because that's how the species continues. And because it's important to men and women alike, and because you will reserve the right to make it important to you, but if it's important to a man, then you want to sort of shame that guy while you go and do monkey double backflips, as Coach Greg Adams would say, on the penises you prefer. I would love to see, just to show some of these ladies a lesson in the hypocrisy that they're preaching. I would love to be able to flip a switch, and all of a sudden these guys whose penises they prefer don't have as much of an interest in sex. They're just not interested in sex. I love to see how these women deal with it then. Not to force them to sleep with someone else, but rather just to get them to understand the hypocrisy of what they were saying. I understand the joke now that I heard years ago about an old woman who came across a genie. And the genie said, you can have 3 wishes. And she said, could you make me young again? And genie said, yeah. She said, can I have a little more money? And the genie said, yeah. And as she became younger, she began to feel more of her libido coming back. And then she looked over at a cat and she said, could you turn this cat into a handsome man for me? And the genie said, you got it. So the genie turned her pet cat into a handsome man. The man walked up to her, sat down in her lap, whispered in her ear, I bet you wish you didn't get me neutered now, don't you, bitch? I understand the joke now. I heard it years ago. I thought, okay, it's kind of funny. Now I actually get it because I'm an African-American man. And I see that most African-American men, normal guys, are fully expected to become community eunuchs or pets. Actually, labor animals, like donkeys. I'm gonna nut you, you ain't gonna have no orgasm, and you gonna do the work so that I can go over here and screw this dude who ain't doing the work. Because he's genetically superior to you. Which doesn't explain why she would look to him to not do the work anyway. This is what's going on in the community. Now, what does this have to do with pan-Africanism? Simple. Brothers understand that many other non-black communities are not going to treat us equally. And there are a few exceptions. The tropical Southeastern Asian nationalities generally are better to us. The Malaysians, Indonesians, Filipinos, and Cambodians, and some of their neighbors. I'm not including the Thai in this. They ain't shit. And they're getting worse. But for the most part, in that region, they tend to be exceptions. They ain't so bad. Even when they use skin bleach, it's like they don't have an insult for us. But Arabs, man. I mean, Arabs are like our first descendants outside of Africa, and them niggas just take for granted black is ugly. Like, just right off the bat, take it for granted. I can't deal with them. Latinos, it depends, but we know that does exist in their communities. We know that the young ones are trying to break away from that. Hats off to them. But the point is that there's still going to be anti-black issues you're going to deal with if you're going to jump to these other non-black or even semi-black communities. But if you jump into if you were going to marry women of other black groups, nationalities, but same race, then there is a higher chance of their families taking you in over time. They may have a bias because you're not from their nationality or because you are American, but when they realize that you are a good dude, they're fine. That's okay. A lot of times they can outgrow that issue. They ain't gonna hold your blackness against you, and that's the one thing that ain't gonna change. You go with some of these other groups, even if the woman loves you, the family's gonna be like, yeah, but he's black. And he's gonna be black 5 years from now. And your kid's gonna be black, and we ain't ready for that. Get the hell out of our face. You're cut off from the family. That's what they're like. So what they're doing, what this does is that it actually does boost pan-Africanism with regard to not only survival but marriage. Like I've said in the last one, other groups were the ones who made pan-Africanism a necessity for our survival. Because even if they don't hate us like Arabs don't hate us, they can still be easily brainwashed in a racial conflict to side with whites against us. They would never find out how treacherous whites are until they got us out the way. But what's going on now is that if you do decide, brothers, if you're going to step out, the highest probability you have anyway, you are statistically more likely to go for another black woman, and they're statistically more likely to treat you well, her and her family. So the highest probability of not only your efforts, but of success for your efforts is going to be with the the other African woman, either African Caribbean or continental African or Melanesian or Afro-Latina. That's going to be your highest. You're more likely to try that anyway, and you're more likely to succeed. So now that I've answered BGS's question, I'm tying it into the Pan-Africanism in order to say this. In my last video about how they, meaning non-blacks, made Pan-Africanism a necessity, I forgot to mention that African American women have also made Pan-Africanism in marriage a necessity. It's not that all African American women are doing this. I know that. I don't know what the percentage of the good and the bad ones are. I'm not sure. But what I do know is that the bad ones are out there. They're visible. They're hyper available. Any man can meet them accidentally. They pass themselves off as though they're good women. And you can't escape them. That's what I do know. So they're out there. That's what you actually have to be leery of and wary of. I know they're there. We all know they're there. And what's also going on is that these are the ones who are pushing away the majority of normal men in our communities and telling them, you suck, you're substandard, you're abnormal, but if you'll take care of this idness niggas kids, then maybe we have a use for you. And you might be able to have some, organic orgasms inside of an actual vagina, maybe. That's really what's being, and that's a slap in the face to men. I mean, in all honesty, if you're going to say this to a man, you better be the type of woman that would probably say this to any man, especially if it's just any man to whom you're not married. Now, if that's what it is, you find that men are more likely to be willing to innovate and build and contribute to a society because they're not being slapped in the face and told that they're inferior to some other men. But what sisters from the United States are insisting upon the right to do is to look normal men in the face and tell them that they're genetically inferior and that they're going to be treated genetically inferior to some other small select group of men that are going to get all the benefits and none of the price to pay. But that's not all. There are going to be a few men here that have also driven the majority of African American men into Pan-Africanism marriages or Pan-Africanist type marriages. And that's going to be guys that will defend the dysgenic mating preferences of the African American women. These guys that don't understand how badly regular normal black men are being treated, let alone the ones that are actually nerds, let alone the ones that are actually lame, which is an insult, let alone the ones that are worse than that, actually wimps and cowards. And I can understand why we might not treat these men well. But normal men are being lumped in with them because we have a problem when, like I said, African American women can't tell the difference between normal and weak because of this hyperbolic paranoia they have of finding a wimp. So they got to go for the complete opposite, looking for a silverback. Somebody that'll charge at a man with a gun, like he don't know what a gun is. They're looking for the stereotype that white folks have that they use to justify their shooting of us in the streets. I pulled a gun and told him to stop, and he came charging at me anyway, like we don't know what a gun is. They're looking for that King Kong, which was only used to symbolize a black man named Jack Johnson anyway, who was winning too many boxing matches and had the nerve to travel around the country with a white woman. That's all it was from the very beginning. From start to finish, that's all it was. So they're looking for this. White folks come up with a stereotype. Sisters are looking for a man to be that stereotype. And if you're not going to be that, which is unrealistic and hyperbolic anyway, then you're not even worthy. So you should understand that you're being forced to tolerate celibacy in an insulting manner. And that's what we got going on in our communities right now. So it's not just these other groups. No, we got a lot of African American women that are pretty much saying, no, you need to go into a Pan-Africanist marriage, even though they won't tell you that. That's what they're showing you. And you got some of these men that these women love that are saying, well, I don't see what the problem is, and you so weak, you got to go elsewhere. And they told them, they're pretty much beating the drum for these sisters. because they either don't know or don't care how badly regular normal men are being treated in our communities. But this has got to change. This is foolishness, and it's got to stop. Because right now, no, actually, nah, take it back. Keep it going. Keep it going, because I know African American men married to black women of other nationalities, and usually they're happy. Usually they're happy. And I could tell you this, the more westernized or Americanized that woman is, the less happy these dudes are. That's real. I went on a date once with one woman from a particular island called St. Martin. She was westernized. She was quite westernized. How did I find out? Well, when we met, every single thing I did was subject to hyper scrutiny. It was like everything was wrong. Now, if I'm just not her type when I met her, that's fine. But she had something negative to say about everything. That's just the kind she was. Well, sound like a Western woman to me. But see, that's what it comes down to. And I'm mentioning this because if I use other people's experiences, you're going to say, yeah, but what did you see happen? So I'm telling you now what I saw happen. But I've seen brothers marry women from other islands. I saw brothers marry women from the continent. And for the most part, these brothers was happy. Usually, they stuck around for a while. Usually. If they didn't, they still remained nice and friendly. I remember an African American guy named Will. He was with a Liberian woman. I forgot her name. And I don't remember why they split up. I don't remember what that was about. But I saw him later on, and he said, "Oh, she's a good person. I respect her. We didn't work, but wasn't necessarily her fault. It's not something she wasn't mean or anything of that nature." That's what he said. I remember him saying, "It ain't like with them sisters here, sisters from here." We were in Atlanta at the time, and he was talking about, I guess he was talking about American sisters. I don't know if he meant ATLians or if he just meant African American women, but he said it's not like with the sisters from here. And I even said, well, because I wasn't Muslim at the time, so I felt free to date, and I said, well, am I likely to run into trouble if I date a Liberian? And he said, probably not. Probably not. They're not, you're not going to mistreat you. It's not like that. I said, all right, cool. Okay, fair enough. So, yeah, I say, look, African American women, go ahead. Push these dudes off. Because what you're going to do is you're going to promote pan-Africanism, which is already necessary for our survival and competition with other people. You're going to sit up and promote it in terms of marriage. And there's no better way to promote it. Because I saw it as something necessary. I saw pan-Africanism as a necessary cooperation for our survival, even if we did not like each other. But what you're saying is, no, you're going to have to marry each other if you want us to even so much as survive. So you have promoted my cause of pan-Africanism. And for that, I'd like to thank you. I greatly appreciate that. I hope that this has been a benefit. Like I said, those of you who heard it and you enjoyed the message or you could benefit from it, please spread the message. Even if you don't share the link, just tell them the message yourself, the content. Appreciate that. Assalamu alaikum. Black Horse signing, black out.